Let us look at the syntax of creating an anonymous class. Anonymous class can be created by directly instantiating a superclass or an interface. Let's take an example how this can be done. Suppose if I have a class called, say, super, and then I have a method inside this. Let me call it as a public. I'm going to make an abstract method, and it's not going to return anything. So let's say I have a method. Now, because this is an abstract method, you notice that I cannot directly create an instance. This is what you are familiar with it. So I cannot create a new instance of super. The reason is this particular method that you see over here, that's not completely defined. However, when we think of creating an anonymous class, such a thing is possible. So you just take a superclass over here and use the new operator to create the instance of it. Now suppose within this superclass, if you have a parameterized constructor, and if you want to supply the parameters to that particular constructor, you can always supply the argument followed by the body. Remember, it is this thing is not possible. The reason why I cannot instantiate this particular class is this method is an abstract method. So you need to have an implementation for that method. That is true. So when you try to create a new instance of this superclass, you need to supply that particular method for that particular implementation for that. Now what happens, let's look at an example and you'll be able to understand this. So what do I have here is I have an abstract class over here. So if you notice here, this is an abstract class and there is an abstract method. Okay. So what I do now is I take a class. So if you notice over here, this is a complete class by itself. So if you notice, I have a class called as an outer class. Now this outer class, there is a method. Let's say I have static void main method within this particular class. And what I want to do is I want to get a instance of this anonymous class. So within this method, I go and I try to create a new instance of that anonymous class. When I try to create an instance of this particular class, I need to provide the body for this particular abstract method. So what is being done is when I instantiate this particular anonymous class, I write the body for that method. I have to specify here. What I've done is I have only specified that that method exists. Now that's not enough. You can't just say that that method exists. You have to say what is that method is going to do. So you will have to code and say what is my method is going to do. Otherwise the codes will not work. So here what I'm doing is I'm only going to say that there is just a one simple statement that says anonymous inner class on the print line with the print line. So this is the general technique that we use. So we have a anonymous class and we try to instantiate that anonymous class directly with the new operator. And because this whole thing is declared within a class, we call that as inner class. Now the next part is what will happen during the compilation. We know very well whenever we create a Java class and when we try to compile it, Java is going to create the name of the class followed by class. So this is the general thing that you have seen in almost all cases. When it comes to the inner class, you don't provide the name for the inner class. In that case, what the compiler will do is it's going to take the name of the outer class followed by a dollar, and it's going to create a inner class, and definitely finally it's going to append dot class to that file name. So this is what it's going to happen. Now let's look at the event delegation model. This is a very simple thing. Let's assume that I have a source which is a component. It could be a button, it could be a text box, it could be a checkbox, it could be anything. So I have a component, and when the user interacts with this particular component, that is the source, I want something to be done, and that something to be done is created by this event handler. Now what happens when a user interacts with the button or a checkbox or a text box or anything? The source is going to generate an event, and there must be some component that's going to listen to this event and take the action. So this is how it's going to go. So in a very simple way, the flow is the user is going to interact with the source, and the source is going to generate an event. Event will be listened by event listener and finally handled by a event handler. So this is the general flow. However, things don't start with like this. For a event listener to get the notification of an event, first and foremost thing an event listener must do is it must register with the source saying that I'm interested in listening to the event. So if the event listener does not register with the source will not notify the event listener about any event. So the first step in our program, let us look at the syntax of creating an anonymous class. Anonymous class can be created by directly instantiating a superclass or an interface. Let's take an example how this can be done. Suppose if I have a class called, say, super, and then I have a method inside this. Let me call it as a public